Let us talk transitive and intransitive verbs. Transitive, the trans part of transitive, means that something is moving. That's why you have words like transportation or transport. But in this case, what's moving is actually an idea. Let's say you have a sentence, and it is the boy throws. Now, in this sentence, you have a subject, you have a verb, and you might be tempted to call that a sentence, only I'm hoping that you know that the rule is a sentence must be a complete thought. And if you say, the boy throws, people are going to look at you and say, he throws what? That doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't, because throws is a transitive verb. It wants to move this energy onto a noun that's called the object that will come at the end of the sentence. The boy throws what? The boy throws a ball. Now it's a complete sentence because you've got the subject, you have the verb transitive. Sometimes you'll see it called the VT, sometimes it's a V and then the T is in parentheses. Sometimes the dictionary will just say transitive. Different dictionaries will mark it different ways. But you have the subject, you have a transitive verb, and because it's a transitive verb, you have to then have an object. And this is a complete sentence. Because the main idea, well, let's start with diagramming it the way we would have before. Before, we would have had subject, boy, separated from verb, throws. We then would have had the is modifying boy, so that takes care of the boy throws. And at this point, you're going to be like, okay, what about a ball? Clearly, A is going to dangle under ball, but what do I do with ball? Well, my question to you is ball a required part of the sentence? Is it part of the main idea? Do you have to have it for that to be a complete sentence? And the answer is yes. Then we're going to do something a little bit different. The boy throws, what does he throw? A ball. Because this is a main idea, it must appear on the main idea line, I now have to separate not just my subject from my verb, but I have to separate my verb from my object. And I'm going to do that with a straight line, only this time, look what I did not do. This line goes all the way through the main idea line to come underneath. This line right here, it stops at the main idea line. So you have to make sure that you are correctly showing either a line that goes all the way through that indicates, dude, I'm separating a subject from a verb, or a line that only goes to the main idea line because you're separating a verb from an object. And then, of course, A goes underneath. So when someone says transitive verb, what does that mean? Well, a transitive verb wants to take the action from the verb and transfer it into an object that is part of the main idea. The boy throws is not a complete idea on its own, so you need the boy throws a ball. Now, object is any noun that really is not doing actions, like the boy is doing something. An object is a noun that's having things done to it. So the ball is getting thrown. It's being acted on. It's not doing anything itself. That's why it's an object. But this, whatever is attached to your verb, is called a direct object because it is the object most directly affected by the verb. It's part of the main idea. It is directly related to that subject and that verb. It's part of the main idea. So that's why it's called a direct object or a DO. Sometimes students are like, oh my gosh, how do you remember all these terms? Well, it's actually pretty easy because in English we name things according to what they are. It's the object directly affected by the verb, so it's the direct object. So, what in the world is an intransitive verb? Well, if a transitive verb is moving, then an intransitive verb, the root word in, means not moving. And what this means is the action of the verb is complete all by itself. So if I say, you slept, I have a subject, I have a verb. My question is that a complete idea? You slept. Yes. That's why slept we would call an intransitive verb. So sometimes you will see that as a VI, sometimes you will see that as a V with an I in parentheses, sometimes they will just say intransitive. But what that means is this is an independent verb. So that's how I remember it, that the I in intransitive, I think of it as meaning independent. It does not need an object, a noun, to finish it. It's complete all by itself. So this would simply diagram, you slept, and it is complete. In fact, look what happens when you try to put a noun with an intransitive verb. You slept bed. What? No, that is so very wrong. That is hugely wrong. You can't say you slept bed. Try again. Okay? Let's say that I do want to get the idea bed in there because a bed was involved in the sleeping. Well, how would you have to say that? You slept in the bed. Look what happened. An intransitive verb refuses to have a noun touch it. So, if you want to add an idea, you have to use a prepositional phrase because you cannot attach a noun to an intransitive, an independent verb. Now, can verbs be both transitive and intransitive? Well, I don't know. What do you think? Let's take a look at one. What if I say Dawn dropped? Could that be a complete sentence on its own? Well, sure. People were shooting and Dawn dropped. Maybe you even say Dawn dropped to the floor. To the floor, prepositional phrase, because you cannot attach a noun to the word dropped if what you mean is he fell or he threw himself to the ground. So if what you're trying to say is the definition of dropped is fell to ground, then that is a verb intransitive. But what if I say, no. It's not that he fell to the ground. It's that Don dropped his gun during the gun battle. Apparently, Don is a really, really crappy gunman. But anyway, Don dropped his gun. Well, now, if you notice, this is a noun that is directly finishing the idea of dropping. It is the object most directly affected by this drop. So this becomes the direct object. And in fact, this is now a verb transitive. But what does it mean, dropped? What's the definition of dropped in this sentence? Don dropped his gun. Well, in this case, the word dropped actually means to release his hold. So if Oop, I left an L out. There you go. To release his hold. So, in that case, it is a verb transitive. So, if you use dropped as an intransitive verb, it means you fell to the ground. Oh, she dropped. If you use it as a transitive, you're saying to release the hold. Oh my God, she dropped the baby. So, verbs can be both transitive and intransitive, but sometimes they will actually change their definition. How's that for freaky? By the way, this is why people who are not raised English speakers hate the English language, because the English language is really confusing. But for you to do well on the SATs, you have to understand it. Okay, let's say you have a vocabulary exercise and you look up the verb exculpate. It's part of the culp root word, which means guilt. And so you have exculpate, and the dictionary tells you transitive verb, and many dictionaries will simply say transitive verb. If you run into a dictionary, like if you look something up on the Google dictionary, it will only say that something is a verb or a noun or an adjective. That is a pretty good indication that it's a bad dictionary, because if you look up exculpate and find this, exculpate means to clear from alleged fault or guilt. So it means that you prove someone's innocence. And you then have to write a sample sentence. You might say, the lawyer exculpated. And you see here you have the root word meaning out of, and then the root word guilt. So the lawyer got someone out of guilt. Woohoo! I'm good, right? What does that say in front of verb? It says transitive. What does transitive mean? It means that verb is moving. It wants to move onto an object in the back. It's the object most directly affected by the verb. That's why it's called the direct object. However, your sentence is incorrect because the dictionary told you this is a transitive verb. And because it is a transitive verb, it needs to transfer the energy, which means who did the lawyer exculpate? The lawyer exculpated his client. That word must have a direct object because the verb is transitive. That's why you have to know what these things mean in the dictionary, because when you go to write your own sentences, you could end up saying something pretty darn foolish and wrong if you don't understand what you're looking at. Let's do another one. Okay, this time you looked up the word detract, and you found it means to diminish the importance, value, or effectiveness of something. And so maybe you are talking about your friend's violin performance. And they say, oh my gosh, I have a new bow. I don't think it sounds good. And you might say to them, you know, that new bow of yours, you know, your music is still beautiful. The change in the instrument does not detract. Oh, it would help if I could spell. Or, more precisely, if my pen didn't try skipping when I spelled. There you go. Sort of. Yeah, you can tell what I mean. It does not detract. Is that correct? Well, I have here a subject. I have here verb does detract, and then not is actually an adverb. It hangs underneath. It's a dangly. Is that a complete sentence? Well, what kind of verb is it? It is an intransitive verb. An intransitive verb, the I always remember, the I stands for independent. Is this a complete sentence? And the answer is yes. That is just fine. Now, if you notice, this definition also gives you something here on the end. It says it's often used with from. What they're telling you is this particular verb has one preposition that it really likes, and that is from. So if you want to reassure your friend, what is that new bow not distracting from? Well, it's not distracting from the beauty of the music. It does not distract from the beauty of the music. So if I'm going to diagram this, I have it does detract not from beauty the of music the. That diagram's just fine. So it does not have a direct object, and because it's an intransitive verb, it can't have a direct object. You cannot put a noun behind the word detract. Any additional ideas have to be added in prepositional phrases. So you so far have diagrammed a whole lot of intransitive verbs because you did not have any direct objects. But in English, believe it or not, the verb that is most common is the transitive verb, something with a direct object. In fact, you have no idea how much grief it has given me to try and create sentences that never use direct objects, because most sentences do. And we need to take a closer look at direct objects. Yes, I know this is a big unit, so if you want to, pause the computer, go get yourself a drink, but we need to go into another new idea here. Okay, this should be pretty easy to diagram now. The boy kicked the ball. So we have subject, yep, gotta get on the right pen here. We have subject, boy, verb, kicked. We put that on the main idea line. We separate our subject from our verb. Kicked is not complete by itself. If I say boy kicked, way too caveman. What did the boy kick? The ball. That is the object most directly affected by the verb. And then we use that line that does not go through your main idea line to separate the subject, or I'm sorry, this separates your subject from your verb, and this that does not go through the main idea line separates your verb from your object, your direct object. And then we can put the rest in, no problem. The, capitalized, boy kicked the ball. Well, what if I want to add more information? The boy kicked the ball to me. Now, is it a to me ball? Would I put it under here? Yeah, no, it's not a to me ball. I don't even know what a to me ball would be. Same with boy, it's not a to me boy. No, to me is describing where the direction of the kick is. So it's describing the verb, the action. So it goes under here, to me. And that is a perfectly correct English sentence. However, here's a new rule for you. English speakers are lazy. If we can get away with something, if we can get away with shortening something, we always will. We love contractions. Why? Because it lets us get away with not writing one letter. And we like that. We're lazy. So I want to show you a different sentence. Okay, let's take a look at this one. The boy kicked me the ball. Yes, that's correct. But what the heck just happened? It's the same idea as this. And if the idea is the same, that means it's going to diagram essentially the same. So I still have subject, verb. What is the object that is directly getting kicked? That's the ball. So that's all going to stay the same. So we have boy kicked ball. The boy kicked the ball. Oh dear, I only have one word left, and that is me. Now up here I had a prepositional phrase, and I know how to diagram a prepositional phrase. Well, here the word me is doing the same action as this prepositional phrase. It's describing the direction of the kick. Because it is describing kick, it has to dangle under a kick. But there's a problem. Me is not directly being affected by the kicking. You aren't kicking me. It's an indirect relationship. Me is related to kicked only because it's the direction of the ball. So it's indirectly related. So, okay, I don't want to connect it directly to kicked because it's not directly related to it. Up here I had an angle bracket, so let's just put it on an angle bracket down here so that people get the idea that it is indirectly related to me. There is not a direct relationship. It doesn't touch kicked, but it is indirectly related. So, wow, can I just have a blank line here? That looks really, really weird. Originally, this sentence here was this sentence. Originally in English, we put everything into prepositional phrases. But apparently English speakers didn't like having to use one additional word, and so they started putting this object. Again, an object is any noun that is not taking action itself. So they started putting this object like right in between the verb and the direct object, so that it is no longer in a prepositional phrase, but instead is just kind of jammed in the middle right here. So we have really a word there too, but we've started dropping it, almost like we drop the O in some contractions or the N in some contractions. So what are we going to do? We're going to put an X. In math, what does X mean? It means unknown. Here, X means, yeah, there probably should be a preposition there, but we don't know what it is because as English speakers, we're too lazy to say it. By the way, what word have I said over and over again when I talk about the relationship between me and kicked? Over and over again, I keep saying they are indirectly related. It's not a direct relationship. What is the kicking most directly affecting? The ball. Me is related, but it's an indirect relationship, which is why this is called the indirect object. An indirect object is a modifier for the verb that probably should be in a prepositional phrase, but it's not. Instead, it has been jammed in there between a transitive verb and a direct object. The boy kicked me the ball. This is going to take some practice, so let's try another one. Okay, this is a pretty straightforward one. Odysseus's wife brought a shroud, a burial cloth. So, what is your subject? Well, the wife. What did she do? Let me switch over to my right pen. What did she do? She brought. Now, is brought a direct object? Well, I don't know. Let me try that again. Is brought a transitive verb? I don't know. Does it have a direct object related to it? Yeah, I'm getting tired on this lesson too. Well, what is shroud? Shroud is an object that is telling you what got brought. Can you just walk up to someone and say, wife brought? No, what did they bring? Well, she brought a shroud. So that means this is a direct object. So to diagram this, we have wife brought shroud. That is the main idea, which is why that is what sits on the main idea line. Separate the subject from the verb. Separate the verb from the direct object. And now we can start putting in some of our danglies. We have Odysseus. Odysseus's wife brought a shroud. Well, I could say to you, who did she bring it to? Well, Odysseus's wife brought a shroud to her father-in-law. Okay? This prepositional phrase, to her father-in-law, is it describing what kind of shroud it is? No, it's describing where she brought it. And where is one of your adverb questions, so it's going to go here. To, I'm not writing this out, father-in-law. There you go. Her. No problem. However, what if I have a slightly different sentence? Oh, you saw what I did there, don't you? So let's start the same way. What is our subject? Wife. What is wife doing? Brought. Is brought complete on its own? Is it a transitive verb? If you walk up to somebody and say, wife brought. Well, we already answered no. Then my next question is, what is the object that is directly getting brought? Well, that means we're going to skip back here to shroud. That is the thing that is directly finishing the action, which is why it's called a direct object. So we start the same way. We found the wife, we found the brought. The minute we have those two things on the main idea line, we should say, that's not a complete idea. What did she bring? Well, she brought a shroud. No problem. For some reason, this pen really hates R's. Okay, so we have Odysseus's. I can diagram that easy. Odysseus's wife brought shroud a. Okay. Her father-in-law. What do I do with her father-in-law? Well, is her father-in-law related to the bringing? Sure, it's saying where she's bringing it. It's describing the direction of the action. So it is indirectly related to brought, but it's not the thing that's actually being brought. Indirectly related. That would make it an indirect object. Indirect objects get diagrammed like a prepositional phrase because they frickin' used to be prepositional phrases before English speakers got lazy and decided, that word to, I just don't know. I have the energy to pronounce that whole thing. I mean, the t, the oo, it's too much effort. So they dropped the preposition out and left only the indirect object. And because it used to be a prepositional phrase, I diagram it like a prepositional phrase. However, if you notice, I don't have the preposition, and I can't diagram something that's not there. I have father-in-law, so I'm going to put father-in-law here. I have her. I can put her here. And that leaves me with a blank line. You can't have a blank line in a diagram. That's uncool. So what do? Well, I say it's an unknown word because we left it out. Unknown is always an X. That is an indirect object. So a direct object finishes the verb. You will always have a direct object if you have a transitive verb. If it's transitive, it needs to have a direct object. Indirect objects are less common. But indirect objects, those are going to be former prepositional phrases that are indirectly related to the action by giving some detail about when the action is happening, where it's going, what's going on with it. Now, the very first unit you're going to do here, the first set of diagrams, there will be no indirect objects. The first thing you need to do is make sure that you really learn to spot the direct objects. Now, why is it important that you do this? Well, very simply. On the SAT tests, they love including sentences with indirect objects. Why? Because it is a less common structure. I told you that. You see, I even wrote it down. It says less common right there before I crossed it out. But the reason they like doing this is because sometimes if students have not seen a lot of sentences with indirect objects, it sounds awkward to them. And they say, Odysseus's wife brought her father-in-law a shroud. Oh, it just sounds awkward. I bet it's wrong. I'm going to go try and fix it. Well, the problem with that is this sentence as written is not wrong. There's nothing to fix. Sometimes the SAT can trick you into trying to fix things that are not wrong. In fact, in the grammar section, 25% of the sentences are going to be correct as they are written. In the past, I had a student come to me after the SAT test and go, "Oh, I'm so excited. I found the mistake in every single sentence." At which point I groaned and knew the kid was in big trouble because 25% of those sentences hadn't had a mistake. But they were looking for mistakes, and therefore they found them, even when they didn't exist. So you've got to understand the structure well enough that if you run into an unusual structure like an indirect object, like a hyperbaton, we'll get there junior year, when you run into these less common structures, you don't have this knee-jerk reaction of, "Oh my gosh, it must be wrong." No, it may not be wrong. It may be that you just don't understand the structure of your language well enough. So, before we get to indirect objects and practice and make sure that you can recognize these, go learn your direct objects, diagram your direct objects, get your head wrapped around direct objects, because our real goal here is you need to get comfortable with indirect objects so the SAT test can't trap you. See you soon.